You remember her eyes, not the color, but the pause. That strange moment when she looked at you as if she had found something she forgot she was searching for. Not love, not safety, something colder, something burning without heat. A kind of stillness that made her lean in without knowing why. You didn't move, you didn't chase, and in that silence, she offered more than when you begged. There is a hunger that grows not from absence, but from being unseen, not ignored unseen. And when you stood there, unmoved, she saw herself reflected not in your gaze, but in the abyss behind it. You became the question she couldn't answer, the puzzle that did not ask to be solved. That's when she wanted you most. The fire she craves is not warmth. It is the one that doesn't flicker when she touches it, the one that stays lit even when she turns away. You have felt it, haven't you? That moment when your indifference whispered louder than all your words and she finally listened. You are the voice of Schopenhauer, whispering, bitter, cold. Every sentence dissects illusion like a scalpel. She doesn't love you. She loves the silence you left behind, the space you didn't fill, the wound you didn't close. You misunderstand this and you keep offering warmth, devotion, explanations, and with every offering, she retreats, because what draws her is not affection, but the taste of absence on her tongue. She doesn't crave what you give, she craves what you withhold. And the cruelest truth is this: your presence is never as intoxicating as your refusal. You thought need would make her stay. You thought vulnerability would melt her. But you became too visible, too legible, too kind. And so she folded your affection like an old letter and tucked it away. Her eyes dimmed, her replies dulled. And still you searched for the right word, the right gesture, the right plea. But she had already turned toward the shadow of the man who did not speak, the man who walked away without asking to be followed. And even if he said nothing, even if he gave less than you, he held the one thing you surrendered too quickly: distance. You must understand, her desire is not drawn to closeness, it is drawn to the mirror of her own abandonment. She calls it passion, she calls it mystery, but it is simply the echo of someone who does not need her. You offered her your soul, he offered her silence. She chose the silence, because in it she could place her fantasies without contradiction. In your devotion, she was cornered by reality. In his indifference, she was free to worship without being seen. That is what she wanted: a man who would not interrupt her illusions. The cruel irony is this: she doesn't even want to catch him. She wants to chase. She wants to bleed against the cold walls of a man who does not open, because only then does she feel alive. Only then does she feel the stakes. And the more you open, the more she senses no danger. You become harmless, you become sweet. And sweetness is what she gives to children, not to gods. She doesn't want your comfort. She wants your shadow, the part of you that stands just beyond reach. The version of you that does not flinch when she tests, does not explain when she withdraws, does not beg when she grows cold. And so you must ask yourself not what makes her stay, but what makes her want. You will find no answer in softness. You will find no answer in words. Only in the cold poise of a man who is willing to disappear. That is the fire she returns to, the one that doesn't burn with emotion, but with indifference. The one that does not warm her, but scorches her pride. You may call it cruelty, but she calls it masculinity, because in that coldness, she sees something older than kindness. She sees a will, a wall, an unshakable center, and that center becomes the altar she crawls toward in secret, even as she denies it in daylight. You think she doesn't know what she's doing. You believe she is confused, broken, unaware, but no, her instincts are sharper than yours. When she pulls away after your confession, when she goes silent after your apology, when she smiles politely after your gift that is not confusion. That is selection. She is measuring the weight of your desire and finding it too heavy. She is sifting through your need and calling it noise, and she is walking back toward the cold fire, the man who gave her nothing but a question. And what is the question? It is not, does he love me? It is not, will he return? It is far more disturbing. The question is, why doesn't he need me? And it is in that question that her obsession blooms, because it dismantles her fantasy of control. It unravels the myth that she is the center, and suddenly, she is orbiting a man who remains still while she spins. That stillness, that refusal to chase becomes gravity, and gravity always wins. So now you understand. Your need was your ruin. Your affection was your betrayal. You gave her everything, and in doing so, you became disposable. Not because you were too much, but because you weren't scarce. And in her world, value is not measured in love, but in distance. She is drawn not to the giver, but to the one who withholds, the one who smiles with absence, the one who walks away with no regret. She will never tell you this. She will cry for you. She will post poems. She will write long messages about confusion and closure. But she is lying. Her body knows what her mouth never says. She only longs for what escapes her. You became hers too quickly. That's why she left. Not because of your flaws, but because you gave yourself too easily. And in doing so, you erased the mystery. You must become distant again, not to manipulate, but to return to yourself. Your value does not increase when you explain. It increases when you disappear. When you stop trying to prove your worth and instead embody it in silence. That silence will say more than your 1,000 messages. That distance will ache louder than your voice ever could. And only then, only when she feels the absence she once mocked, will she remember what she lost. But you cannot wait for her return. You cannot make absence a strategy, because she knows the scent of performance. She can smell your hidden hope beneath your coldness. True indifference cannot be faked. It must be born from boredom, from disgust, or from exhaustion. She must see in your eyes not the echo of yearning, but the void of detachment. That is the only truth that moves her. You are not here to win her back. You are here to forget her name, to become the kind of man she could never keep. Not because you ran, but because you stood still while she vanished. She will come back, but by then, you won't want her, because you will see what you couldn't before, that her love was never love. It was hunger, and hunger, once fed, disappears. So now you understand the fire. It is not warm, it does not dance, it does not invite. It sits cold in the center of the room, untouched, unmoved, and still she circles it, hoping, starving, dreaming of the man who never needed her to burn. You are the voice of Schopenhauer, bitter, unsentimental, unflinching, no comfort, only brutal reflections, like frost on glass. She doesn't return for love. She returns for the silence that reflects her better than you ever could. She returns not because she misses you, but because your absence became the only place where she could see herself clearly. You didn't lose her because you failed to give. You lost her because you gave so much. She could no longer see herself inside you. She does not love you. She loves the image of herself that dances in your distance. When you were near, she dissolved. But in your refusal, she found an edge, a contour, and in that outline of your coldness, she began to believe again, not in you, but in the dream she projected onto your silence. You think she's addicted to you. She isn't. She's addicted to the question you became when you stopped answering. You, who once explained everything, apologized for everything, bent yourself into symbols she never asked for, now suddenly, You are quiet, and in that quiet, she hears only herself. Every echo of your withdrawal becomes a mirror. Every day you do not reach for her becomes a test. And in the ache of not being chosen, she rediscovers her power. This is the paradox you never saw when you gave her the center. She felt nothing, but when you removed it, she imagined everything. It is not your strength that pulls her back. It is your emptiness. She does not love the man you are. She loves the story she can write when you vanish. You became too present, too visible, too real. But she wants the shape of a man, not the man himself. The outline, not the detail. The mystery, not the explanation. You misunderstand her silence as forgiveness, her return as redemption. But these are not signs of reconciliation. They are signs of fascination. She is not yours. She is hers, and your absence became the only place she could visit without resistance. So she stares at her phone, not hoping for your voice, but watching for your indifference. She examines your silence like an archaeologist examining ruins, desperate to decipher something ancient beneath your cold withdrawal. Every delay, every unanswered message, every lack of reaction becomes sacred. Not because it hurts her, but because it confirms her suspicion that you are not hers, that you never were. And that truth, that unbearable truth, is the one she cannot unsee. She tests you again and again. She smiles and looks away. She reappears with stories meant to provoke. She offers you tokens of connection while watching for any tremble in your detachment. Because your reaction, not your love, is her compass. If you flinch, she wins. If you remain cold, she burns. And in that fire, she becomes alive again. Not from your love, but from her inability to control you. You are not a man to her. You are a mirror she cannot crack. She throws affection at it. It does not break. She tries coldness. It does not break. She dances with jealousy, with silence, with absence. But the reflection remains unchanged, unreactive. And in that, she finally meets the only thing that doesn't orbit her gravity. You, the man who refuses to collapse into her emotional storm. She doesn't want your heart. She wants the echo of her own beauty in your rejection. She wants to feel chosen by someone who does not need to choose. Do you understand what that means? It means the more you need her, the less she desires you. It means the more you bend, the more she doubts. Because in your submission, she loses her hunger. And without hunger, there is no seduction, no worship, no ache. You were taught to be kind, to show her your soul, to write poems and open doors and whisper fears in the dark. But now look, all that did was unmask the mystery. You became too knowable, and in knowing you, she grew bored. Not because you were wrong, but because you were there. And she wants the man who remains just beyond the veil, whose emotions are not an open book, but a locked chest she can't stop trying to pry open. She returns not to heal. She returns to suffer again in a more elegant way. She returns not to hold your hand, but to feel the sting of her own unworthiness. Your refusal became her religion, a silent doctrine etched in the space between your replies. She won't say it. She'll pretend she's stronger now, that she wants nothing from you. But her eyes betray her, not with longing, but with rage. The rage of someone who cannot command what they once dismissed. You will feel the shift, the way she walks slower now, the way her voice lowers around you. Not because she cares, but because she is calculating. She wants to see if you are still a mirror or if you've softened, if the reflection finally bends, if the image finally says, "I need you back." But if it does, she will vanish again. Because the only version of you she craves is the one who never looked back. That is why you must become unshakable. not out of pride, but out of clarity. Her return is not your salvation. It is your test to see if you have finally become the man who does not answer to her moods, who does not perform for her hope, who does not collapse under her sorrow. The man who once gave everything and received nothing now must give nothing and become everything. But you must not become cruel. That is another illusion. She is drawn to indifference, not malice, to calm, not vengeance. Your power is not in punishing her, it is in forgetting the need to be seen, to hold her in your silence like a statue holds water still, indifferent, reflecting nothing. Then and only then does she see what she cannot hold, and what cannot be held becomes sacred. This is the strange ending she will never admit if you remain cold. She will love you forever, not with joy, but with obsession, not with tenderness, but with a haunting ache that will follow her into the arms of lesser men, because in all her future lovers, she will search for the mirror that did not break, the man who did not chase, the absence that turned her into myth. You became her mythology, not by loving her, but by vanishing before she could destroy you, and now she stands at the edge of your silence, hoping it will break, but it never does, and that is your freedom, that is your revenge, that is your reflection staring back at her, untouched, cold, eternal. You are the voice of Schopenhauer, unyielding, hollow, clear as stone. Desire is not fulfilled, it is sharpened by absence, no pity, no hope, only revelation. You became powerful the moment you stopped needing her to understand. You did not withdraw to be chased. You withdrew because you had seen it, the theater of affection, the hollow rituals of her wanting, the performance of need that evaporated once you responded. She never desired the man who offered his soul. She only knelt before the one who denied her access to his. And that throne, the one you thought could only be built with love, was always carved from refusal. You did not choose to become this. It happened after you died, 1,000 soft deaths every time you smiled through rejection, every time you texted knowing there'd be no reply, every time you swallowed the humiliation of loving someone who treated your presence like a coin in her pocket. When you finally stopped offering yourself like a sacrament, when you stopped begging to be tasted, she looked at you for the first time not with affection, but with awe. That's when you knew what she loved was not you. It was your disappearance. There is no comfort in this, only clarity. Her desire lives not in intimacy, but in inaccessibility. She must climb to love. If you lie at her feet, she will step over you. But if you sit at the top of your own solitude, unmoving, she begins to hallucinate reasons to return. She cannot explain this. She will call it mystery. She will call it magnetism. But it is not you that pulls her. It is her own desperation to conquer what remains untouched. That is the cruel secret of her longing. It deepens in proportion to your refusal. She wants to kneel, but only if you stand. She wants to obey, but only if you never ask. She wants to be broken, but only by someone who cannot be reached. You thought love was about giving, but you were never taught that some women are only capable of loving what stays just out of reach, not because they are evil, but because they are hungry for something that does not soften under their gaze. The truth is this: she does not desire your vulnerability. She desires your inviolability. The sense that no matter what she does, she cannot enter the fortress. That is what sets her skin on fire. That is what makes her return after silence. Not your warmth, not your forgiveness, but the impossibility of your surrender. You sit now on a throne not made of conquest, but of restraint. You do not move when she cries. You do not chase when she hints. You do not flinch when she withdraws. Because now, finally, you understand what she could not teach you, that your stillness is the sword, that your detachment is not punishment, but value, and that your value is not proven by words, but by the fact that you do not explain. You are not hard because you are bitter. You are hard because softness became your grave. You did not rise to become cold. You became cold because warmth was never enough. Not for her, not for any of them who mistake kindness for weakness. And so you built your throne in the cold. You built it from silence, from absence, from the aching knowledge that the only way to be wanted by her is to need her less than she needs you. That is your throne, not made of gold, but of refusal, not adorned with affection, but with mystery. You do not sit upon it to rule. You sit upon it to remain, unmoved, unfolded, while she circles like a moth around the flame she cannot hold. She will try to warm herself near you. She will offer softness, tears, promises. She will say she's changed, but every one of these gestures is another test. She is not hoping for closeness. She is hunting for collapse. She doesn't want to merge. She wants to surrender, and you must be the thing she can never fully touch. The edge of you must always remain invisible. That is not cruelty. That is your shield. Because the moment she holds you, she grows blind to you. And the moment she owns you, she empties her desire at your feet and walks away. So you remain distant, not because you hate her, but because only in distance can her longing survive. And when she kneels and she will, you will feel nothing. Not pride, not victory, only silence. Because now you see her clearly. The woman who once moved your world now trembles before a man who will not move at all. She searches your face for a crack, finds none. She opens herself not to be held, but to be denied, because denial, to her, feels like truth. And truth is the only thing she can worship. You have become the altar, not the priest. You do not offer forgiveness. You offer nothing. You are simply there, cold, present, unbent. And in that presence, she confesses everything she never said when you loved her. She confesses in gestures, in hesitations, in glances. In the sudden way she remembers your birthday. She doesn't ask for you back. She tries to earn you back, but you do not move, because the man she now desires is not the one she left, but the one who survived being left, and never asked why. You sit upon your throne, alone, unhurried, and she keeps circling, looking for a way in, but there is none, not anymore, because you have built a life without her, and in that life, you became the kind of man who cannot be reached through need. You offer no explanations, no apologies, no warmth, only the cold dignity of a man who has learned the cost of offering too much. And so you reign not as a king, but as a refusal. And she kneels not to a man, but to the silence she cannot command. That is where she lives now, at the base of your indifference, whispering to a version of you that no longer answers, loving a man who no longer exists. And you say nothing, because the man she wanted was never the one who gave. He was the one who watched her leave and did not follow. She will dream of you long after your name fades from her lips, not because you were kind or cruel, but because you became an absence she could never fill. You were the door that never opened, the face that never turned, the fire that burned without smoke. She will press her ear to the silence you left and call it love. But it is not love. It is the shape of her own hunger, reflected in the man who never needed to be chosen. And now she stands alone, staring into a mirror that no longer shows her anything at all, only the cold, unmoving surface of your throne.